When I saw this headline from Comic Book Resources, I was wondering if the media is finally acknowledging that what a lot of us have been saying for some time now, that Star Wars is essentially dead. Because when you start hearing about superhero fatigue, that was basically the media running defense for the studios, and the studios running defense by saying like, the reason people aren't watching our movies is because it's just superhero fatigue. People are just tired of superhero movies. It's not necessarily the best excuse, but it is just an excuse that they're making. But at least it's acknowledging that the movies aren't doing as well as they used to. So when I see Star Wars fatigue, it's like, okay, are they finally acknowledging that Star Wars isn't doing as good as it used to? Because up until this point, every time a new Star Wars show comes out or something like that, the media is always saying like, oh, look how good it's doing. It has huge ratings according to Disney. Never mind the fact that Disney doesn't actually share how they get their ratings. But, you know, trust me, bro, the show is better than the last show that they had. But now that I see a headline like this, I was thinking like, okay, good. It's finally acknowledging that Star Wars has a problem at least. Until I started looking into this article. And then I realized like, oh, they're just trying to run defense for Lucasfilm again, or they're upset because Star Wars isn't doing what they want them to do. Like, look at this right here, just in the first paragraph. Online critics coined the pejorative superhero fatigue to delegitimize comic book movies. And this wasn't online critics that coined the term. Like I said, it was the media, and it was the studios trying to make an excuse for why their movies were failing. They were saying like, oh yeah, the movies are good. It's just people are tired of superhero movies, and that's why it hasn't been doing too well. We need to have less superhero movies. And this even tries to say that's the case, where it's like, yeah, the market was kind of oversaturated, and that's why some of them did bad. But it also acknowledges that like, if the movie is good, then people will come out to see it. And it mentions like some of the more recent ones, Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, things like that. Or how Deadpool and Wolverine, that's a really anticipated movie, so it expects that to do good. So they're basically saying what people online have been saying for some time now. It's not superhero fatigue, it's bad movie fatigue. The only caveat I would put to that is I would say it's superhero fatigue in the sense that I admit in the past there were Marvel movies and things like that weren't necessarily the greatest, but they still did pretty well because people would just watch a Marvel movie habitually. Captain Marvel is a prime example of that. A movie, if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score, not a good movie, but it did really well because it was a Marvel movie, and it was also sandwiched between Infinity War and Endgame. So people just went to see it because they thought they had to see the latest Marvel movie, and they don't give them that benefit of the doubt anymore. And I'm talking like fans don't give the studio that benefit of the doubt anymore. So each movie has to stand on its own. The article does say how Star Wars doesn't necessarily get the same leeway though, because when it comes to comic books, there's a little bit more variety in what they can and cannot do. But with Star Wars, they're a little bit more limited. And it's saying not necessarily the old fans. Well, it is kind of saying the old fans of Star Wars, I'm talking the legacy fans, are the reasons why it's failing. But it's saying it's failing because they got tired of Star Wars and they don't want to watch it anymore. And that Disney, the reason their movies and shows are failing is because they abandoned the new progressive wing of Star Wars fan, you know, the few that are out there, in order to try to appease these legacy ones. Because when Kathleen Kennedy came in, she was all about, you know, the Force's female identity politics and stuff like that. And they say that's what made The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker successful. But because there was those, man babies, the loud vocal minority of people who were complaining about The Last Jedi, well, then they tried to retreat back to the well with The Rise of Skywalker. At least that's what this article is saying. And as a result of all that, they turned away or Disney turned their back on the new identity politics side of things. And now those people have abandoned them. But Disney is still maintaining that they're trying to appease the legacy fans of Star Wars. So you can just see how ridiculous this is. They're saying the reason Star Wars is failing is because Disney is trying too hard to appease old time Star Wars fans and not enough time trying to appease the identity politics wing of the Star Wars fan base. And really, is anyone buying this thing? Because it's just kind of laughable. And that's why I'm talking about it, because it really just goes to show that they haven't learned a thing, or at least the media is still trying to stay on Disney's good gracious, but it's just not working for them. Like, look at this right here, what they say when it comes to The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. For many fans, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, felt like the saga point of no return. It was a retreat into a comfortable nostalgia made to appease zealous fans who hated the more subversive Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Although the sequel trilogy's final earned more than $1 billion, it was the Star Wars trilogy's lowest earning and rated entry. It also set the tone for Star Wars' current status quo of diminishing returns. And it talks about how other things like not counting Andor, almost every new Star Wars entry was a reverent ode to the franchise's past. I think this is what really throws a wrench into their argument here, because the most successful thing that they put out after the movies came out was The Mandalorian, and that wasn't anything Star Wars related. It was, maybe it seemed somewhat familiar. It felt kind of like a Star Wars property, but it also felt like it was its own things. Didn't have any legacy characters except for maybe later on, season 2 and 3. That's all it was basically just setting up other spin-off shows and stuff like that. But the first season was pretty good, or at least I liked the first season. A lot of people did as well, because it was like, okay, they're finally doing something interesting with this. And then they kind of went back to like, okay, well, now we got something that's successful. Let's lean into the identity politics aspect of it, because that's what they're saying with here. It's like, oh, well, the Rise of, or The Last Jedi didn't work. So let's just, and that appeased the identity politics side of the Star Wars fan base. But it didn't work, or it was criticized online. So let's try to appease those existing legacy Star Wars fans by just making something for them. And I would argue The Rise of Skywalker was not it, but that's what this article is trying to say. And like I said, they're saying it turned away both fan bases, and that's not really what they're doing. What they're honestly doing is they're doing what Kathleen Kennedy wanted to do all along. The whole South Park, put a chicken and make her lame and gay sort of thing. But that's kind of what they're doing here. And we saw that with the Acolyte trailer, because you can see right here, the dislike ratio, over 600,000 dislikes, less than 200,000 likes on this. This is a terrible ratio for a new show. And this is peak Disney Star Wars, what they're doing. It's leaning heavy into the identity politics side of things. Leslie Headland, former Harvey Weinstein personal assistant, who's the showrunner for this, she can't help but bring up the different check boxes that she used for this show, particularly the alphabet people and how they're represented in this sort of thing. And this is what Disney's idea was when they made Star Wars. They're like, okay, this is the existing Star Wars fan base, and these are those various check boxes that we're trying to appease that aren't necessarily Star Wars fan base. So if we make something with both these groups in it, well, then everyone will be happy, right? Well, that's not really how it works. It's kind of like a Venn diagram. You got the Star Wars fans, and then you got the identity politics fans. And then when you make a show like The Acolyte, it basically overlaps, in that area in the middle is their existing fan base for this type of show. And as we can see right here, that's not a very big fan base for this. And that's why a lot of the Disney Star Wars stuff has been failing. The things that actually do succeed are the ones that feel like they're not actually trying to pander to various groups like that. And that's why like the first season of The Mandalorian was successful. And then when they started pandering, well, then it started falling off a cliff as far as the audience scores on various sites like Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, things like that. Shows like Obi-Wan that they say is like, oh, this is supposed to be fan service, but still they're leaning into that identity politics side of things, and people don't like that. So what they should do if they want to be successful in the future is to try to abandon that segment of the Star Wars fan base, the one who cares about identity politics, because clearly they're not a sizable enough group of people in order to actually bring in the ratings for what they need in order to finance these type of shows. But I don't know, that's assuming that they can actually succeed to begin with, because honestly, I think Disney Star Wars, it's not Disney Star Wars fatigue. It's just that Disney Star Wars is dead at this point. The only way you can actually recover it, assuming it can be recovered, I would say, is get rid of a lot of the leadership over at Lucasfilm right now, particularly Kathleen Kennedy, and probably have a long leave of absence, maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years or so, nothing Star Wars related. And then after that, you kind of start afresh and forget all the identity politics. Just try to go back to Star Wars and just tell stories that people like when it comes to Star Wars. And I think you can probably bring some people back and maybe even introduce a new audience to Star Wars. Like I'm talking like younger people who were probably too young for it now, but maybe at that time frame, they'll be the right age for it. Other than that, though, I think they're going to continue just to burn money every time they make something Star Wars related. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And if you can, click that like button and share the video. I'd really appreciate that because it would really help out the channel. Thank you.